Vanessa Blake thought humiliating the quiet older woman would make her look important in front of the wealthy guests standing beneath the chandeliers of Carter Crown Hotel. But she had no idea that within the next hour, her entire career would begin collapsing in complete silence. Before we continue, where are you watching from today? And if you believe people deserve respect no matter how they look, make sure to like and subscribe because stories like this remind us what dignity truly means. Now, back to Evelyn Carter. The marble floors of the Grand Hotel lobby reflected warm golden light as businessmen rolled expensive luggage across the polished entrance, and soft piano music drifted through the air like a carefully rehearsed performance. Every detail inside the Carter Crown Hotel screamed wealth, elegance, and exclusivity. At precisely 6:15 p.m., the revolving glass doors turned slowly, and an older woman stepped quietly inside. She wore a simple beige coat despite the cool spring evening and carried a worn brown handbag that looked decades old. Her silver blonde hair rested neatly against her shoulders, and while nothing about her appearance demanded attention, there was something unusually calm about her expression. She moved slowly through the lobby, taking in every detail with observant eyes. At the front desk, Vanessa Blake immediately noticed her. Vanessa stood tall behind the marble reception counter in a tailored navy uniform with her blonde hair tied into a flawless bun. At 35 years old, she had built her reputation around maintaining what she proudly called the Carter Crown standard. To Vanessa, luxury meant appearances. Perfect guests, perfect clothes, perfect image. The moment she saw Evelyn approaching the front desk, her smile tightened almost invisibly. She had already decided exactly who this woman was before a single word had been spoken. Nearby guests glanced over briefly before returning to their conversations. A bellman slowed his cart slightly, sensing tension before it even arrived. Evelyn stopped at the counter and offered a gentle smile. "Good evening, dear," she said softly. "I believe I have a reservation." Vanessa's manicured fingers tapped the keyboard lazily as her eyes scanned Evelyn from head to toe. The expensive watches and designer suits surrounding them only sharpened the contrast. Vanessa looked back at the older woman and lowered her voice just enough to sound polite while still carrying unmistakable judgment. "Are you certain you're at the correct hotel, ma'am?" The question hung in the air like a quiet insult. And for the first time that evening, the pianist in the corner stopped playing for half a second. Evelyn Carter did not react to the insult immediately. That was what unsettled people later when they replayed the moment in their minds. Most guests would have become embarrassed, defensive, maybe even angry. But Evelyn simply stood there beneath the warm chandelier light with one hand resting gently on her handbag, her calm blue eyes fixed on Vanessa Blake as though she were studying something far more important than rude behavior. Around them, conversations in the lobby softened into whispers. A wealthy couple seated near the fireplace exchanged amused looks while a young valet near the entrance shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa maintained her polished smile, though the irritation behind it was becoming harder to hide. "This is the Carter Crown in downtown Manhattan," she continued smoothly. "Our guests usually book several weeks in advance." The implication was obvious. People like Evelyn did not belong here. Evelyn nodded politely. "I understand," she replied in a soft voice. "But I believe my assistant made the reservation personally." Vanessa typed dramatically on the keyboard for several seconds, though she had barely checked the system at all. She already believed she knew exactly what this situation was. "I am sorry," Vanessa said, drawing out the words carefully enough for nearby guests to overhear. "I cannot seem to find anything under your name." A faint murmur spread through the lobby. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "Could you check under Carter?" Vanessa paused for half a second at the name, then quickly dismissed the thought. Carter was one of the most common last names in America. It meant nothing to her. "Ma'am," Vanessa said with controlled patience, "the presidential suites in this hotel cost nearly $12,000 per week." She glanced deliberately at Evelyn's coat before adding, "These accommodations are designed for a very exclusive clientele." The cruelty in the sentence was hidden beneath perfect customer service training, which somehow made it feel even colder. The pianist in the corner resumed playing softly, but even the music now felt tense. Evelyn looked around the grand lobby slowly, her gaze passing over the marble columns, the crystal lights, the employees standing nearby pretending not to listen. There was sadness in her eyes for only a brief moment. This hotel had once been her late husband's dream before it became an international empire. Back then, he used to say luxury meant making every guest feel valued the second they walked through the door. Evelyn returned her attention to Vanessa and spoke gently. "Could you please check one more time, dear?" Vanessa exhaled through a tight smile. "Security may need to assist if this becomes disruptive." And just like that, the atmosphere inside the entire lobby changed. The words settled over the lobby like a sudden drop in temperature. Several guests lowered their voices while others openly watched now, sensing the uncomfortable tension unfolding beside the marble reception desk. Vanessa Blake remained perfectly composed on the surface, but internally, she felt a strange satisfaction building. In her mind, this was exactly how luxury hotels protected their image. People either belonged in places like Carter Crown or they did not. And to Vanessa, Evelyn Carter clearly did not. Two security guards standing near the entrance exchanged uncertain glances before slowly approaching the desk. Their polished black uniforms reflected beneath the chandelier light as they moved carefully, clearly hoping the situation would resolve itself before becoming a scene. Evelyn noticed them immediately. Still, she never raised her voice, never complained, never argued. That calmness began unsettling more people than anger ever could. "Ma'am," Vanessa continued smoothly, "I am asking one final time. Do you actually have confirmation for a reservation?" Evelyn slowly opened her handbag and removed an older silver phone. The device itself looked almost outdated compared to the luxury surrounding her. Vanessa noticed a few nearby guests smirking quietly at the sight of it. One businessman whispered something to his wife that made her laugh into her champagne glass. Evelyn glanced down at the phone screen briefly before looking back up. "I am sure there has simply been a misunderstanding," she said gently. "These things happen." Vanessa gave a tight nod. Unfortunately, misunderstandings can become disruptions very quickly. One of the younger hotel employees standing behind the concierge counter looked visibly uncomfortable now. His name tag read Ethan. He had worked at Carter Crown for only 6 months, but even he could feel something deeply wrong about the way this woman was being treated. "Maybe I could double-check the reservation system," Ethan offered carefully. Vanessa turned toward him instantly, her smile disappearing for the first time. "That will not be necessary." Ethan lowered his eyes immediately. The room went quiet again. Evelyn noticed everything. The nervous bellman avoiding eye contact. The older couple pretending not to stare. The nervousness on Ethan's face. The satisfaction on Vanessa's. It was almost as though she was silently taking inventory of every person in the lobby. Then Evelyn looked toward the massive crystal chandelier hanging above the center of the room. Her late husband personally chose that chandelier nearly 20 years earlier during the opening of the first Carter Crown location. He used to stand exactly where she stood now, greeting every guest himself regardless of how they looked. A faint sadness crossed Evelyn's expression before disappearing just as quickly. She lowered her eyes, typed a short message into her phone, and quietly pressed send. Across the lobby, one of the executive office elevators suddenly lit up. The executive elevator doors remained closed, but the glowing light above them immediately caught the attention of several employees across the lobby. Something unusual was happening upstairs. Vanessa Blake noticed it too, though she quickly dismissed the feeling rising in her stomach. She straightened her blazer and forced another polished smile toward Evelyn Carter. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "if you cannot verify your reservation, I will have to ask you to leave the property." The words sounded rehearsed, almost elegant, but the humiliation behind them was unmistakable. One of the security guards shifted awkwardly beside Evelyn. He was old enough to recognize the difference between maintaining order and embarrassing someone publicly. "Perhaps we can give her another minute," he suggested quietly. Vanessa shot him a sharp glance. Carter Crown policies are very clear. Evelyn looked at the guard and offered him a gentle smile, almost as if she appreciated the small act of humanity more than he realized. Then she turned her eyes back toward the lobby itself. The grand piano, the marble staircase, the crystal chandeliers reflecting gold across the polished floors. Every inch of the building carried memories invisible to everyone around her. 22 years earlier, Evelyn and her husband Thomas had stood inside an unfinished version of this exact lobby, wearing construction boots, while rain leaked through the temporary ceiling. Back then they had only one hotel, and a dream built on a simple promise. Treat every guest with dignity. No exceptions. Evelyn still remembered Thomas repeating those words during staff training while nervous employees took notes around folding tables. Luxury means nothing without kindness, he always said. The memory faded as the present returned. Vanessa was now typing aggressively into the computer, clearly hoping to end the situation quickly before other guests complained. Nearby conversations had almost completely stopped. Even the pianist was watching now. Ethan stood frozen behind the concierge desk, his face pale with discomfort. Something about Evelyn's composure felt impossible to explain. Most people shrank under public embarrassment. Some became angry. But this woman simply observed everyone with calm, patient eyes, as though she already understood exactly how the evening would end. Then suddenly, the phone at the front desk rang. The sharp sound cut through the silence so abruptly that several guests turned their heads at once. Vanessa blinked, irritated, before answering professionally. Front desk, this is Vanessa speaking. Her confident expression lasted less than 3 seconds. The color slowly drained from her face as she listened. He is coming down, she whispered. Across the lobby, the executive elevator chimed softly. The private door slid open. And the moment Michael Harrington stepped out with panic written across his face, the entire atmosphere inside the hotel changed. Michael Harrington moved across the lobby faster than anyone had ever seen him move before. His polished dress shoes struck sharply against the marble floor, while every employee nearby instinctively stepped aside. At 48 years old, Michael was known throughout Carter Crown hotels for his composure under pressure, but tonight panic had completely overtaken him. His face had gone pale the second he received the executive call upstairs. Vanessa Blake stared at him in confusion as he approached the front desk, without even acknowledging her. The entire lobby seemed frozen in anticipation. Guests lowered their drinks. The pianist slowly removed his hands from the keys. Even the security guards straightened nervously. Michael stopped directly in front of Evelyn Carter, breathing hard as though he had sprinted through the entire building. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, he lowered his head respectfully. "Mrs. Carter," he said quietly, "I am deeply sorry." Silence crashed over the lobby so completely that the soft hum of the chandeliers suddenly felt loud. Vanessa blinked once, certain she had misunderstood what she had just heard. Her eyes moved slowly between Michael and the older woman standing calmly beside the reception desk. "Mrs. Carter," she repeated weakly. Michael turned toward Vanessa with disbelief written across his face. "Why?" he asked carefully, struggling to remain professional. "Is the owner of Carter Crown Hotels standing in this lobby without access to her suite?" The question hit the room like shattered glass. One guest nearly dropped his champagne flute. Ethan covered his mouth in shock behind the concierge counter. The 2 security guards immediately stepped backward, horrified by what they had unknowingly become part of. Vanessa's entire body stiffened. Her perfectly rehearsed professionalism collapsed in seconds as realization spread across her face. She looked again at Evelyn's simple coat, the worn handbag, the quiet posture she had mistaken for weakness. And suddenly, every word she had spoken replayed in her head with unbearable clarity. Evelyn herself remained calm. There was no anger in her expression, no satisfaction. If anything, she looked tired. Michael immediately motioned toward the front desk computer. "Pull up the penthouse reservation now," he ordered sharply. Vanessa's trembling fingers moved across the keyboard. This time the system instantly revealed the reservation she somehow failed to find before. Presidential penthouse suite. Reserved indefinitely. Authorized directly through corporate executive access. Vanessa's breathing became shallow. The wealthy couple near the fireplace who had laughed earlier now avoided eye contact entirely. One of the businessmen quietly stepped away from the scene in embarrassment. Evelyn slowly looked around the silent lobby one final time before speaking softly. "I only asked for kindness," she said. "That was all." And somehow, those 6 words hurt more than any punishment Michael Harrington could have given. Vanessa Blake felt the entire lobby staring at her. But somehow the silence hurt more than the humiliation itself. Just minutes earlier, she had stood confidently behind the marble reception desk, believing she controlled the room. Now her hands trembled so badly, she could barely keep them hidden beneath the counter. Michael Harrington turned toward the surrounding staff, with visible anger simmering beneath his professional restraint. Every executive manager to the lobby immediately, he ordered. Now. Employees scattered instantly. The atmosphere inside Carter Crown Hotel had completely transformed. No one whispered anymore. No one smirked. Even the wealthy guests who had silently watched the humiliation unfold now looked deeply uncomfortable standing beneath the golden chandelier light. Evelyn Carter remained calm. Through all of it, she quietly placed her old phone back into her handbag, while Michael stood beside her like a man awaiting judgment himself. "Mrs. Carter," he said carefully, "if I had known you were arriving tonight personally, I would have prepared the entire staff." Evelyn looked at him with tired eyes. "That is precisely why I did not announce myself." The words landed heavily. Michael lowered his gaze immediately because he understood exactly what she meant. For years, Evelyn had secretly visited different Carter Crown locations without warning, wanting to see how ordinary guests were treated when employees believed no executives were watching. Most hotels passed her quiet tests. Some failed badly, but never like this. Vanessa swallowed hard as realization spread through her chest like ice water. This had not been a misunderstanding. It had been a test of character, and she had failed publicly. Ethan slowly stepped forward from behind the concierge desk. Unlike everyone else, he looked directly at Evelyn with genuine remorse in his expression. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I am sorry I did not speak up sooner." Evelyn turned toward him, and for the first time that evening, a faint smile appeared on her face. "But you wanted to," she replied gently. "That matters." Ethan looked stunned by the kindness in her response. Across the lobby, the two security guards stood rigid with embarrassment. One of them quietly removed his hat out of respect. Vanessa finally found her voice again, though it barely sounded like her own. "Mrs. Carter, I truly did not know." Evelyn looked at her for a long moment. There was no cruelty in her eyes, no triumph, only disappointment. "That is the problem," Evelyn said quietly. "You believe kindness should depend on who someone is." The room went silent again. Michael Harrington closed his eyes briefly because he knew those words would echo through the company long after tonight ended. And somewhere deep beneath the polished luxury of Carter Crown Hotel, the values the company was built upon were finally being remembered again. Within minutes, senior managers from every department began arriving in the lobby one after another. Their expressions shifted from confusion to alarm the moment they saw Evelyn Carter standing quietly beside the front desk. Housekeeping supervisors, restaurant directors, concierge executives, and floor managers gathered beneath the chandelier in tense silence. No one knew exactly what had happened yet, but everyone understood something serious had gone terribly wrong. Michael Harrington stood rigid beside Evelyn as though trying to shield the company itself from the weight of her disappointment. Vanessa Blake remained frozen behind the reception desk, unable to escape the reality unfolding around her. For years, she had imagined herself climbing higher inside Carter Crown hotels. She studied luxury hospitality obsessively, memorized guest etiquette, learned which watches signaled old money and which designer brands mattered most. Somewhere along the way, she had convinced herself that appearances were the same thing as value. And now that belief was collapsing in front of the entire staff. Evelyn slowly walked away from the front desk and toward the center of the lobby. Her footsteps echoed softly across the marble floors while every employee watched carefully. She stopped beneath the massive chandelier and looked around the room with quiet sadness. "When my husband and I opened our first hotel," she began softly, "we could barely afford fresh flowers for the lobby. No one moved. But Thomas believed something more important than luxury would keep guests returning." Evelyn's eyes drifted toward the front entrance where guests continued entering carefully, sensing the unusual atmosphere inside. "He believed people remember how you make them feel." Michael lowered his head slightly because he had heard those exact words during his first corporate interview nearly 15 years earlier. Evelyn looked back toward Vanessa, though her tone remained calm. "A woman once walked into our first hotel wearing work boots covered in paint after her car broke down during a snowstorm. She could only afford one night." The lobby remained completely silent. One of our employees gave her the best room in the building because he noticed she looked exhausted. Evelyn paused briefly. Years later, that same woman became the investor who saved our company during its hardest financial year. Several employees exchanged stunned glances. Vanessa's breathing became uneven as the lesson settled painfully into her chest. Evelyn continued quietly. Character reveals itself most clearly when nobody important appears to be watching. Ethan looked down immediately because he understood the deeper meaning behind her words. So did Michael. So did everyone else standing there. Vanessa finally stepped away from the desk, her confidence completely gone now. Mrs. Carter, she whispered shakily, I do not expect forgiveness. Evelyn studied her for a long moment beneath the golden light. Then she spoke with a gentleness that somehow carried even greater weight than anger ever could. This company was never built to impress wealthy people, she said softly. It was built to make strangers feel welcome. And once again, the room fell completely silent. Vanessa Blake stood motionless near the front desk, while the weight of Evelyn Carter's words settled over the lobby like heavy rain before a storm. Around her, executives avoided eye contact. Employees who once admired Vanessa's polished confidence now looked at her with quiet disappointment. The golden lights above seemed colder somehow, exposing every uncomfortable truth hidden beneath the luxury of the hotel. Michael Harrington finally stepped forward carefully. Mrs. Carter, he said respectfully, I take full responsibility for what happened tonight. Evelyn turned toward him slowly. Do you? She asked softly. The question stunned him into silence because he realized immediately that she was not asking about policies or procedures. She was asking whether leadership itself had slowly allowed appearances to become more important than humanity. Michael looked around the lobby and, for the first time in years, truly saw it through her eyes. Employees terrified of making mistakes. Guests treated differently depending on clothing and status. Staff members trained to recognize wealth faster than kindness. Somewhere along the way, Carter Crown had begun protecting prestige instead of people. Evelyn walked slowly toward one of the sitting areas near the fireplace and gently rested her hand on the back of a leather chair. Luxury is a dangerous thing, she said quietly. If people are not careful, they begin believing expensive surroundings make them superior. No one dared interrupt her. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears she struggled desperately to hide. I thought I was protecting the hotel, she admitted weakly. Evelyn looked at her with calm sadness. No, she replied softly. You were protecting an image. The truth in those words struck harder than humiliation itself. Ethan stood nearby listening carefully, knowing he would remember this moment for the rest of his career. Across the lobby, even several guests appeared moved by the conversation unfolding in front of them. One elderly businessman slowly removed his glasses and lowered his head in thought. Evelyn glanced toward the grand chandelier once more, memories flickering silently behind her eyes. My husband used to stand in hotel lobbies for hours, she said quietly. Not to impress investors. Not to greet celebrities. He watched how ordinary people were treated when they thought nobody important could see them. Michael swallowed hard because suddenly he understood why Evelyn traveled anonymously. She was not checking rooms. She was measuring character. Vanessa finally stepped forward, her voice trembling. I know I failed tonight. Evelyn studied her carefully before answering. Failure is not what defines a person, she said gently. What defines them is whether they learn after the truth becomes impossible to ignore. The lobby remained silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Less like judgment, more like reflection. And beneath the warm glow of Carter Crown Hotel, people who had once cared only about appearances were finally being forced to confront the difference between status and dignity. The lobby of Carter Crown Hotel remained unusually quiet long after the confrontation should have ended. Guests still lingered near the fireplace and marble staircase, not because they wanted entertainment anymore, but because something deeper had settled into the room. It was the uncomfortable realization that every person there had witnessed the difference between status and character unfold in real time. Evelyn Carter stood near the center of the lobby beneath the warm chandelier light, while employees waited anxiously for her next words. Yet there was no anger in her posture, no dramatic display of power. Somehow that made the moment even more unforgettable. Michael Harrington finally spoke again, his voice heavy with regret. Mrs. Carter, I promise you this will never happen again. Evelyn looked at him carefully before answering. Policies may change overnight, she said softly, but hearts change much slower. Michael lowered his eyes because he knew she was right. Across the room, Vanessa Blake quietly removed her name badge from her blazer. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at it resting in her palm. Just hours earlier, that badge had represented prestige, authority, and pride. Now it felt painfully small. Evelyn noticed the gesture immediately. "Do not do that," she said gently. Vanessa looked up in confusion. "Mrs. Carter, after everything I said." Evelyn slowly walked toward her. "Humiliation rarely teaches people anything useful," she replied quietly. "Reflection does." The entire lobby watched in stunned silence as Evelyn placed the name badge back into Vanessa's shaking hand. Tears filled Vanessa's eyes, not from fear anymore, but from the unbearable weight of grace she did not feel she deserved. "Tomorrow," Evelyn continued softly, "you will personally welcome every guest who enters this hotel for the next 30 days. Vanessa blinked in surprise. "Every guest," Evelyn repeated. "The tired travelers, the families, the elderly couples, the people who look wealthy and the people who do not. And you will remember tonight every single time you smile at them." Vanessa nodded slowly, unable to speak. Nearby, Ethan quietly smiled for the first time that evening because he finally understood what leadership actually looked like. Not dominance, not intimidation, dignity. Evelyn turned toward the grand entrance one final time. Outside, rain had begun falling against the glass doors, soft and steady beneath the glow of Manhattan lights. She paused briefly before leaving and looked back at the employees gathered in silence. "Luxury should never make people feel small," she said gently. "Otherwise it is not luxury at all." Then she walked slowly toward the elevator while the entire lobby stood motionless watching her disappear behind the closing doors. And that night, beneath the chandeliers of Carter Crown Hotel, people who once judged worth by appearances finally learned what true class actually looked like.